Progress.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of what are we talking about this time? Tips for communicating with your military spouse or law enforcement spouse. Thanks for sticking with us. We were here last week, but got through only 3 points last week, so another 3 points this week. I am Vanessa Donaldson, and I am a military spouse transitional coach. And I am working with here Janet Wizawadi, who is also a military spouse of over 50 years, and I'm over 20 years. So combined together.
Police spouse.
Police spouse. It's right. I'm military. She's the police spouse. Military.
We're a lot like your military because we move a lot with the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yeah. Yes. And she's in Canada and I'm in the US. So thanks for correcting me. Military spouse and law enforcement or police spouse. So similar issues with our husbands who work, high stress jobs. So last week we mentioned 3 points, which were listening actively, being supportive, and keeping an open mind. And you can catch that replay in the link that we've posted in the comments. So go ahead and catch part 1 before you can watch part 1 after part 2. That's perfectly fine. And today we're going to continue with 3 more points just in our short time together in about 20 minutes. And hopefully bring some value to our military and law enforcement people. And basically, any marriage, communicating, really any relationship. But we focus on military and law enforcement today. So number 4 for communicating effectively with your military spouse or law enforcement spouse would be to stay connected. This is challenging when you're physically apart from each other a lot. So when a spouse is deployed or away at training, which happens, in 26 something years, I think my husband deployed over 5 times and lots of training in between. And so that work up to plus the deployment led to probably 8, 9, 10 months apart sometimes. So lots of training away from home, deployments, the stress of being like in a war zone while the mom is at home with the kids. How do you stay connected? How do you try to, keep that bond, keep that spark, keep top of mind when life is busy and you're running around in a whole different world from your spouse? So, Janet, what do you want to add with staying connected and some tips for someone who's been married well over 50 years? You've learned a few lessons along the way.
Yeah, well, to begin with, when my husband first went to training, we had to write letters because phoning was very expensive. That was in 1973. And so it was letter writing. And for many years, because to phone in those days, like we didn't have cell phones, we had landlines, and they charged quite a bit to have long distance phone calls. We didn't have all those perks. Now it's great with all the communications because even though less retired, I continued to travel and work. And so FaceTime, we do FaceTime, we do video chats through Facebook. It was great. It's so much easier now to do that and just quickly send a message. And I believe the military too, you guys, especially if they're not in the middle of something, that they can contact home. You have a certain period of time. So we were very fortunate that I could just, turn on my computer and do that. But for many years, it was letter writing. And you know what? I think we should do more letter writing because you know what? We get our thoughts down. And another way of communicating, that's for distance and that. But when you're at home, I think we mentioned it in last session, was if you have to have a real intense conversation, hold hands and look at each other, because it's so easy to just storm off and say, okay, I can't handle this anymore. Let's figure it out. So
I love it. Yeah, good nugget from last time again, the holding hands, just like I think I had added when you're praying together. It's kind of this communal praying for good things, praying for the future, praying for your family. And it's hard to be in a state of anger and frustration and resentment at that same time. So that's great. You spurred me to think about pre-internet as well. When we were first dating and I met my husband in Africa, I was in the Peace Corps, serving in the Peace Corps in West Africa. My husband was with, we were dating at the time, Marine Security Guard. And there was no internet yet. Internet came out when I was actually getting out of the Peace Corps. So we actually even had like a whole class. Part of our transition out was, hey, this is email now. Everybody's got an AOL account. This is how it works. And they were showing us a screen with stuff. And we were just like very confused. But that traditional letter writing is how we communicated. I was like 3 days away from the Capitol in this village where I was working. And he would send out little care packages for me that went with all these like NGO trucks, World Bank, United Nations, whatever projects they were doing out there, building wells. So I would get these packages left for me at the hostel, the regional hostel, which was still like 2 hours from my, village spot. But yeah, I kept all those letters. I don't know how, with all the moves we've made, these lovely letters he'd write to me at like midnight on post one, just sharing his heart and being expressive, which for a Marine, I was like, oh, wow, it's like opening up words. And he's like, I don't think I did all that. And I've got the box of letters to prove it somewhere in a storage unit somewhere. But yeah, so that letter writing back and forth, the traditional turning of the page and reading the handwriting, yeah, that's different than a text. So I do agree with bringing back that just traditional handwriting and penmanship, Once we had a phone call, he had moved on to Rome, Italy, and I was still in Africa. So the volunteer regional leader had this phone that we could use. It was mainly for them for communication with the State Department or the Peace Corps at the Capitol. But since we were so far remote, but we could use it for personal calls too, but we got charged and it was like $1 a minute. I'll never forget. My Peace Corps check was like $200 a month. That's what I was living on for my food and everything. And $1 a minute call. I had to write a letter weeks in advance to my husband to let him know I'm going to be coming into this location, a 2-hour road trip for me. Talk about love, huh? And so please meet me by a phone at this time. And I'll call this number. And I had a phone number to reach him wherever he was in Italy. And yeah, it was $200 bill by the time we got off. I didn't want to hang up. I love you, and we go on to something else. And I'm watching the meter. I could see this counter like on the phone. It would like literally rotate and it would go 1, 2, 3. And boy, that was a trigger. But yeah, $200 later, and there went my entire, allotment for the month. So I had to get creative and scrape by, borrow some money from a Peace Corps volunteer. It was crazy. Email started when my husband was on one of his deployments on a ship out of California. It was one of the first times you could send emails, and that was exciting. So we were all sending emails to our spouses, trying to communicate. And then that lasted barely a few weeks. They barely left California. And by the time they got to Hawaii, someone had already broke the rules of what they can do with their emails and, information they were relaying, photos, whatever it was. It shut down the whole program. And, Sergeant Major, whoever's commander said, all right, we gave you guys a chance. You had 2 weeks, didn't work, no more email. And then the letter writing started. He was writing on the back of MRE boxes too, sending me notes, putting a postage stamp. I'm like, okay, that's kind of romantic. It's like all he had. They don't leave with envelopes and all that. So yeah. And once I sent a satellite phone to an entire unit, I did a whole fundraiser out of Texas and got this whole church involved. And I got little SIM cards for everybody. And I sent the satellite phone to his unit. They were so remote. And everybody got like a 10-minute call with their spouse. And then the money cut off. That was all I could afford. And I did a fundraiser for it. So there are ways to get creative. But that's how we stay connected, and sending pictures of the family, right? Like sending pictures if you've got kids, sending those visual pictures of each other too. So yeah. Wow. Well, I didn't think that was detailed, but okay. That's okay. Tip number 4, staying connected. Let's go on to tip number 5, which is taking care of yourself. So there's a lot of talk nowadays. No one really talked about this whole self-care thing before. It sounded like so selfish, like self-care, like, why does somebody have to take care of themselves? That's, take care of others. Don't take care of yourself as much. You don't need to pamper yourself or do something special for yourself. So I'm not saying go out every week and, spend hundreds of dollars on a massage or whatever, but, healthy choices for eating, healthy choices for your exercise routine, that kind of self-care. So yeah, for your emotional needs, your physical needs, mental health needs, it's so important that we actually fill our own cup and take that time and carve it out, because if we don't actually block it on the calendar, we're going to fill it with something else. So yeah, Janet, what would you add to taking care of yourself and self-care so that you can be your best version before so you can connect better with your spouse?
Well, that even that word was never, ever brought up, right? Self-care. And you know what? We weren't taught anything like that. I can remember one thing that one of the older member spouses said to me one time. She says, don't worry about your house. When your husband's home, spend time with him, because you don't know what will happen, right? But as far as self-care, that was to look after your spouse, but yourself, we didn't do anything other than I joined things. Like my go-to was to be, I was on Beta Sigma Phi. I would volunteer, and I became part of the community. So I think that probably was more not in the words, and not, intentional, but building your community outside of the force. But we also lived on a military base for a couple of years, because we were in a remote area that was made up of the US military and Canadian military. And then because we were such a small police unit, we could live on the base and communicate with them, and entertainment and stuff. So, unknowingly we did it. Now today I make sure that I have massages, I see chiropractor, and meditation, and read, take time to read. Even when your kids are little, guys, like daycare or play dates, make arrangements, especially if your spouse is away. Take that break, because I can remember one time Les was away and I was really sick, and we just moved and I didn't know anybody. I locked myself in the bedroom. The two kids, they were 2 and 3, sitting outside the room crying, but I knew where they were, but I had no other way to take care of myself. I was too sick to do anything. So, we do what we have to do, and, take care of yourself, but take the kids. Like, we were lucky. We were on an island with huge, beautiful beaches. Like, it was isolated. We had to fly in. There was no ferry or anything. That was on they call it Haida Gwaii now. It was the Queen Charlotte Islands, and it's off the coast of Alaska. You can see Alaska on a clear day from the beach. It was massive. And so if anybody older, that they might have, it was a communications base. So yeah, it was really, really a neat experience. But I could sit, that beach was huge, and when the tide was out, it was lots of beach. So I could sit on the beach with a log and read a book or whatever, and the kids would just play in the sand. So, there's ways we can do that, but definitely make friends with other spouses that you can make play dates. Or if you're not on a base, in the community, there's church, there's all kinds of groups and places, especially today, there's so much more support.
That actually leads to point number 6, which says seek support. It's like you have the cliff notes already. So yeah, the self-care is more separated for just like something for yourself that brings you joy. Like you mentioned, reading, if you like to crochet, like something that you like to do that maybe your husband's not so into, but it's okay to have that for yourself. And now it leads right into seeking support. So that's more of a communal experience. So definitely like support groups, even if some people get therapists or something. Through the military, I know there's chaplains. So I would, recommend chaplains for the military community too. That's what they're there for. Their mission is actually to help with, families that are struggling with certain things, and just to help guide them through for different denominations.
Something that is not expensive, that's easy to do. You know what? When you put your kids to bed, go have a nice hot bubble bath, cup of tea. Some people like wine, but you know what? That's my go-to. A nice hot bath, relaxing bath, and it doesn't cost you anything.
No,
and the kids awesome. Bed, you can hear them if they wake up. So.
And that's if you have a bathtub now in a house. There's so many new homes that they've somehow taken the bathtub out. I don't know in Canada, but in the US, everything is beautiful stand-in showers with nice glass door frames and all that. But it's like an added thing now sometimes for the bathroom. And
that's really sad, because that's really relaxing. Plus your kids, my kids spent long time. You could put them in the bathtub when they were little and they just play.
Yeah.
You could sit there and read a book, but they were just playing.
Yeah. And we run our house out as an Airbnb too when we're traveling with the van life. So, we have a bathtub in one of the bathrooms, and that's very useful. So we get more families joining because, kids want to play in the bathtub with the little squeaky toys and all that stuff. And there's connection just to be sitting on the floor. And that's just bringing back those days of watching your kids in the bathtub playing and interacting in there with them. So we have now like a hot tub too in the backyard. So that's kind of like our nice little self-care thing, especially Florida, like a hot day of sweating and working in the yard or whatever we're doing, sweating a lot. So we go in there, we leave the temperature actually cooler than warmer a lot. So it turns it more into like a cool bath, which actually reminds me, when we were camping in Mexico, this was a new thing to me, but people were having these meetups and events for ice baths. I don't know. I know in Europe too, like my mom in Germany, like you run into the water certain times. And if she goes to the sauna, like they literally submerge themselves in the ice water because it's supposed to be good for your bones, for your varicose veins. Like it's like a healthy, it's flushing. Okay. So I need to learn more about that. But yeah, people had buckets set up. We were in the middle of the Baja, Mexico, along a beautiful beach line with like 1,000 vans, and they had this event circle space. So that was community. People could come, and if they wanted to contribute anything, they could put their name on the chalkboard and the time, what the event was. Like if I wanted to do a free Zumba class or something, I could type that up, come dance at this time. People were doing meditation, yoga, breath work, all this stuff. And then they had different demos for like drones, all these things that RVers are really, interested in. So one of the things they did was they had an ice bucket in these ice 2 or 3 in the middle of this, sandy pit area. And I said, what is this with the ice water thing? And people were lining up and they're cheering each other on and just going in one by one. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And now I keep seeing more posts. Now that I've seen it once, it's kind of in my awareness. And so, this ice bath thing, it's part of self-care, I guess. I don't know. I haven't jumped into one, but you could just watch the people's reactions too, getting in it. And I mean, I guess you have to learn to manage your breath work too. It's kind of together, because if not, you kind of just hyperventilate and stay stuck. So maybe I'll have someone on about ice baths one time. But yeah, self-care. You don't have to go and torture yourself like that. Find something that brings you pleasure. And then I always add my little 7th bonus tip for communication for anything. And that just involves being together as a husband and wife, or spouses together, but being in nature together. And that's why, the van life has really become like an extension of our lifestyle, who my husband and I are spending all that time boondocking, off grid, getting off the technology, just going for a hike in the mountains. You can find a state park or something near you. You don't have to go extreme and buy a van and, travel like that. Or you could still have a van and do things on the weekend if you're working during the week, summers if you're a teacher. People have reached out to me. We've had actually friends that have gotten vans, and I think you're even considering a van again. So getting out in nature, it just adds that element of togetherness. It creates bonding and memories outside of your like boxed life. Someone was telling me it's like we live in a boxed life. We get in a boxed car. We drive to a boxed office. So this is how you live unboxed. You have to be in your van in that box for a little bit. But when you open that sliding door and you've got like, the Utah or mountains behind you or something like that, it's pretty epic. And when you make those memories with your spouse, which people always, oh, I can't be in a van with my spouse. How can you do that so long and day in, day out and for months? Oh my gosh, that must just be torture. Don't you guys want to kill each other? And there's moments I, go in the back of the van and I close the little sliding door and I sit on the porta potty and I have a conversation with my mom in Germany on WhatsApp. So yes, I mean, we're going to get on each other's nerves. We're human beings. But for the most part, the positives outweigh the negatives. And I know you've done the van life too. So what can you add to the element of nature?
The one thing about when you say you can get on each other's nerves, that is so true. And nothing more so once a member retires. Like I was used to having the house to myself to clean and that, and all of a sudden 24/7 he's there. But the other thing is to support each other and to say, like, my husband knows he drives me crazy if he's home too long. And so I'll say, okay, here's a list. You go run errands. and I'm sure I drive him crazy. So, find ways to love each other and spend time that you need for yourself, right? But
Mhm.
support each other on that, right? It goes both ways. I'm sure I drive him crazy and he drives me crazy, but that doesn't mean we don't want to be together.
Yeah. So true. And it just reminds me when my husband first retired, yeah, I was kind of panicking too, like, oh my gosh, he's going to be home all the time. And the routine definitely changes. And that's partly why I'm a life coach for military spouses to help with that transition. So I ended up going back to work when he stayed home. He said, I'm home now. The kids are in high school. I want to be involved with all their activities and all that. I was so excited that he could enjoy them in their senior year. Well, it was freshman to senior years. Two of our kids were just starting high school and then in high school. And I said, maybe I can go play outside the house. Can I go take on a full-time job for a while? Which, was a challenge too, sticking to a whole routine and a whole different lifestyle of getting into a car, driving on the freeway. It was just different, but I did it. I ended up going to work for a solar company for a few years, and it was, I was a project manager and the whole thing. So I like being, in control of the moving pieces and helping that project go from beginning to end. But yeah, it was interesting having him home at first. There were schedules for the kids and all that, and there was adjustments, like we had a rotation for even the school pickup stuff. And it was like, okay, now ball's near court. This is your stuff. I used to drive the kids. Here's the schedule. I had a coordinated, colorful map or whatever. But, he was just enjoying his retirement and just getting out there. And for him, getting on the water was his peace and therapy. So he was on the ocean a little too long one day. And I think my first day of work, I turned off my phone, put it in a drawer because I'm not going to be on the phone. I'm at work. I had like 46 text messages I'll never forget from like 5 different moms from the carpool. Where's your husband? Where's your husband? And they have daughters too. They don't like them walking on the streets. And, I got off work. I said, where are you? He's like, oh, I'm, still fishing halfway to Catalina Island, completely like in his own world. And I'm like, yeah, today was, your pickup day for the kids. So that carpool shrunk down to just one neighbor on our street. They're like, we're out. He's like, these kids are too spoiled. They can just walk home. You know how far I have to walk to school? That whole thing. It's like, this isn't going to work. So yeah, the roles shift when they stay home. But I love that he could be at every event with our kids at school. The Fellowship of Christian Athletes was doing meetings and stuff, FCA. And he was just that involved dad. And, unfortunately for them, he was also home when they came home from school. So they call him, in the US at least, they call them latchkey kids, where you got your key, you're in and out. And it was like, we did not have the latchkey kid experience in our home because I was at work, but I felt comfortable knowing dad was there kind of, doing the home front thing. And he's a great cook, great chef. He just took over the kitchen and honed that space and made the most amazing meals. And the kids even preferred his meals. They'd come home and, who cooked dinner, mom or dad? I'm like, well, tonight mom made a, crock pot this morning and we're going to have that. And then if it was dad's cooking, you could just see a little more pep in their step. But yeah, he was right there at the door and open up and they'd walk in the house and he'd say, hi. And then he'd want to know about their day and all that. And the kids would come up to me and whisper, when's dad going back to work? Is dad getting another job? Those were their only questions. I'm like, dad is staying home. He's not going anywhere. He's here for you and to get all that connection that was missed when on those years apart. This is what he's doing now. And they're kind of like, okay.
Cooking, definitely. Les does more cooking. When I was away, because I was away quite a bit, and I got him, especially COVID, I got him HelloFresh. And so it delivered to home, and he's got a stack of recipes like this. And we just found, you adapt, right? I like different foods than he likes. And so we take turns. If he's cooking something I don't like, I'll just cook something. But we are accepting of that. It's not like, oh, you don't like what I cook. It's just that I like this and you like that. Let's just adapt.
Yeah. And in that cooking department, cooking together is a wonderful thing. And, I got laid off from that solar company and then we went on to our own boating ministry, decided no more working for everybody else, doing the grind thing, putting in tons of hours, all that effort. I got like employee of the month and the next month I get a slip. It's time to pack up your office and go. So yeah, we did our own boating ministry, working for ourselves. You can't blame anybody else but yourself when you're doing your own business. So we had a lot more quality time together and we enjoyed spending time in the kitchen cooking together. Like I think half the day, I think, is our conversation of what we're going to make, what we want to eat that night, and then getting the ingredients if they're not in the fridge, and just spending that time. And I don't mind, maybe I take the lead on something, he takes, and whatever needs to be done, but chopping the garlic, prepping all the side things, and then just setting up that space, maybe having a glass of wine together while we're cooking and laughing and listening to music. Oh my gosh. I like to put on music for like the theme I'm cooking. If it's Mexican night, like you'll hear some Mexican mariachi music in the background. If we're making pasta, you'll hear some Italian music I'm playing, in the background on my Pandora or Spotify. I mean, it's just like everything for me. It's my nature. It has to be an experience. And you can't just do one thing. You got to get all the senses in. So cooking, I love cooking with my husband. And it's a great example for the kids too. So the kids will see that growing up. And now we go to visit our daughter and her boyfriend, and they're living in Maryland. And when they get together, every time we get together with them, we see them and we watch them. We're the guests now. So we're sitting on the couch. And they're cooking in there together. They're cooking in the kitchen. They're making us a meal from scratch. The HelloFresh is a good substitute sometimes, but from scratch, even better. And it was just like the fruits of the spirit were coming through. I'm like, oh my gosh, our daughter's doing the same thing, cooking with her boyfriend. This is awesome.
Well, HelloFresh is all fresh produce.
It's all fresh ingredients.
And just the recipe, but there's no waste. You don't, and that's one thing that we found, because, he'd go to the store, what should I buy today? Well, this showed up and he had, 3 meals for the week, which usually was more than enough for one meal. He'd always have another one. And that's what he liked. He didn't have to worry about a grocery list or throwing stuff out, because there's just him and my granddaughter were there. So you never use, the whole head of lettuce before it starts to turn brown or something. So so that was, and we don't do it now because we're away so much, but it sure, and really for just over $400 a month for groceries, just for the HelloFresh, that was well worth it, because I spend way more than that if I go to the grocery store.
Right. And I think we're both, because we've done the van life, we're somewhat minimalist. Like we think of recycling and doing conscious shopping and all that. So if fruit does end up going a little bad, or the brown leaves on the lettuce are there, like everything gets recycled in our little compost bin, which our daughter has picked up that habit too. So we're happy to go to her place, and I'm like, oh, she's got her compost bin going. And then all that gets recycled right into our garden in Florida, and things grow really easily in Florida. I mean, I just sprinkle like melon seeds, and a few months later, the Airbnb guests might be taking pictures like, you've got some melons in your yard. I'm like, enjoy it. I got some tomato seeds from somebody, little cherry tomatoes. And while we were gone for the last 4.5 months, we were, off to California and camping in Baja, Mexico. And those vines were just growing all over the place with this heat and humidity. So repurpose your food that's going to waste, and fruits and veggie kind of thing. Put that in your garden, reuse it somewhere. So, but thank you so much. That we've got Phil here who joined us. Phil, who's also a military veteran. I've been in other circles with him. And Greg, also military. We've got 2 vets on here. So we've got, I'm surprised the women aren't here, but the men are. But you know what? I like that, because that means that they are paying attention to what the female perspective is on these things, and what maybe they got a nugget or two that they can bring back to their home, and, walk in with a little more pep when they see their spouse tonight, and they'll be like, what got into you today? And be like, well, I listened to this little LinkedIn Live with some ladies. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us. If anybody has any questions, put it in the chat and we'll get to it here before we close in a couple minutes. And I will just summarize again what we've been talking about, the 6 tips for communicating with our military spouse and law enforcement spouse. Boy, I sure can pick some long titles. I got to shorten that up a little. We went over last week the first 3 parts: listening actively, being supportive, and keeping an open mind. And then today we went over the other 3 points, which is staying connected, taking care of yourself, or self-care as this day and age says the wording more, and then seeking support. And I added a little bonus number 7, which is usually my get back into nature together. When you get into nature, it just, you can't help but decompress whatever stresses and worry you have. It's kind of like an antidepressant. Like exercise can be like an antidepressant. It's ways to medicate, but not with actual taking medication pills. Like medicate in nature. I say charge your soul, not just your cell phone. And meditation is your medication. And Janet uses that for self-care too, the meditation part. I'm trained and certified for 6-phase meditation. So can definitely walk people through there. Oh gosh, it's already about that time. So Janet, how do people reach you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, and they can always text me at this number, 780-983-0840.
Excellent. We'll have our info in the description. And myself, Vanessa, you can reach me at resetwithvanessa.com, helping you reset your life, reset your next season after the military. And I'm also doing VA disability audits for any military out there that are struggling with their claims in the US claims with the VA. I can help walk you through, do a free consultation and see if we can get that rating up. This company I work with, I'm a third-party contractor for them, and they've helped my husband in the past, and they can maybe help your husband as well. Or if you are the female military veteran, help you as well. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll check back here for other conversations around the military life and law enforcement and other goodies. So thanks all, and we are signing off. Take care.
Bye, everyone.